Hey, Lead Up listeners, Mike Harbour back for another great guest interview on the Lead Up podcast. I'm excited to invite Shannon Forrest on the show today. Shannon's a career nurse and currently a chief nursing officer for a hospital in Louisiana, the United States, state of Louisiana. Just south of me, and I'm really excited. We're going to talk about mentorship today, so I want to have you go ahead and grab a pen and paper. We're going to learn what is mentorship, why it's important, who are some great mentors that Shannon's had in her life, how to be a great mentee as well. I think that's important. The world's in desperate need for leadership right now, and it's in desperate need for those that are ready to learn about leadership and be better leaders for the future. So I'm excited to have this conversation today with Shannon. Shannon, welcome to the Lead Up Podcast.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, really excited to have you. You know, I'm up in Arkansas, so not too far from you. I actually get down to Louisiana once in a while. I've got a customer in Baton Rouge I do a little work with, so kind of drive right through where you're at
Awesome.
once in a while. Tell the audience a little bit about you, your kind of your role, how long you've been there, your leadership journey to this place.
Oh my goodness, it's definitely been a journey. So I started out in nursing back in I'm so sad to say this, 1995. So I've been around for quite some time, and got into leadership completely by accident, believe it or not. I was working for a cardiology group as a hospital nurse and had just had a child. And the hustle and bustle of that practice, busy practice, was really too much for me as a single mom. So I was approached by another nursing leader who said, "Hey, I think you'd be great for one of these telemetry units that we're opening up. Would you consider applying?" And I thought, well, huh. No, leadership was never something I really thought saw myself doing, but I thought, okay, why not? And that was in 2003, and I have loved it ever since. And so my journey has been long, but very fruitful. And I can honestly say that every role that I've had between then and now has really developed me personally, professionally, spiritually. And I'm so happy to be the chief nursing officer here at in Alexandria. I have been here now for almost 3 years. Kind of got here as an interim basis from the Southeast Texas area. I was at one of our sister hospitals, and they needed a CNO here in Alexandria, and asked me if I'd be willing to come on an interim basis, just to kind of help them out until they were able to find a permanent replacement. Fast forward 3 years, and I'm still here. I
Yeah.
fell in love with them. They fell in love with me, and it didn't take them long to convince me to stay. And I, like I said, have really enjoyed my time here.
That's great. So 21 years now, you've been in leadership. Isn't it interesting? You said you accidentally fell into it. Unfortunately, or fortunately, we could look at it from either side. Most leaders get into leadership by accident, right? They're by default, you've been here the longest, you're the most
Yes.
experienced person, we like you the best, you've got the most education, whatever those things are that we make decisions on to promote someone into leadership often are by accident, right? Maybe we never aspire to it. So let's talk about that a little bit. I mean, we could go real deep on that subject, but what along the way, when you stepped in 21 years ago into that first leadership role, were you prepared? What were the biggest challenges for you to, you know, grow at that time into the leader you needed to be?
So was I prepared? Absolutely not.
Mm.
Let me be very clear about that. I was not prepared. However, I was very fortunate to start my leadership role with another brand new leader who was coming into leadership as a brand new leader as well. And so she and I actually formed a bond and a great friendship, and we're best friends today till today. But we learned how to be leaders together. And so it was trial by fire. If I had an experience, I shared with her, I asked for her input, asked for her advice, and vice versa. And that's really how I began leadership. And so I sought her out as I guess, a mentor, so to speak. And she did the same with me. And we just kind of learned how to be leaders together. And actually, we continued our education together and became CNOs at different facilities together. And so it's been a great partnership with her and friendship throughout the years.
I love that story. I'm a big believer that we become like the people we hang around, right? And isn't it interesting now that both of you are CNOs at different locations? Y'all challenged each other. I was in the military for a number of years, and we always had what was called battle buddies in the military. Somebody's got your six, right? They push you, you push them, you protect them, they protect you. And then you grow together as well. What are some of the the lessons learned along the way about the importance of having that colleague, battle buddy, friend, whatever you want to call it, to help push you, drive you, keep you sane along the way as well?
Yeah, that's great. That's a great point. So I love your description of battle buddy because that's exactly what it felt like. You as a leader, you pour so much of yourself into other people that you get it's not unusual to get drained and you're tired and you get frustrated because things don't always go the way you think they should. For example, you think you're finally hired up and your schedule looks great, and then somebody walks into your office and gives a 2-week notice or doesn't show up for a shift. And so to have that individual to be able to bounce things off of, and it's like, I've got this hole in my schedule, but hey, this is an idea I'm thinking about. What are your thoughts? And to be able to say, oh no, I don't think that'll work, or let me tell you why I don't think that'll work, or have you thought about this? It really helps you become more well-rounded, but it also, like to what you said, it keeps you sane. And so we cried together, we laughed together, we got mad at each other, but we did push each other to be better than what we were because we felt that we owed that to the people that we led.
Mm,
And we did not want to be mediocre. We wanted to be the best leader we could be for those individuals that were under our purview.
I love what you just said. Lead up listeners, make sure you heard that. Write this down. We owed that to the people we led. I'm a huge believer, Shannon. I talk about it a lot, and on the podcast, all the training, coaching we do. Once we're a leader, we have a huge responsibility to those that we lead. They don't have a responsibility to us. We want them to, but we have a responsibility to them to lead them well. And if we do that, hopefully they're going to reciprocate that responsibility back to us, right? But it begins with us as the leader. How old were you when
Oh,
you learned that? Like it's my responsibility to them versus their responsibility to me.
so I was probably in my mid 30s
Mm,
when I learned that, and I will tell you, along this journey, I had two different leaders that stick out in my mind. I had a CNO that I absolutely did not want to be anything like, and I had one that I wanted to be just like.
mm,
And even today, he and I are still very close to one another, and I still call him for advice. And how do you handle this, or what would your approach be? Because he inspired me so much when I was under his purview that I knew that was the kind of leader that I wanted to be. He poured so much of himself into me as a leader so that I could pour into others, that I knew that if I ever got to sit in a CNO chair, that was the kind of CNO I was going to be.
I love that. Yeah, we all have great examples in our life, right? Where we've had great leaders and we've had terrible leaders in our life. And I often hear in the work that I do, look, I've interviewed literally over 20,000 people in my life. And I've talked with thousands more of leaders, right? And coached and trained lots of leaders. And many of them, Shannon, say, when I become a leader, right? Maybe some are kind of emerging leaders. When I become a leader, when I get to that level, I'm never going to lead that way. Yet they still do. How
Mhm.
do we make sure that when we get to that level, we don't be that leader we say we're never going to be like?
So a lot of it is you have to continuously learn. You never stop learning, especially as a leader. So I seek out podcasts such as yourself. I seek out different books. I look at different journals to constantly keep me grounded to the kind of leader that I want to be. And then I did a lot of work around emotional intelligence because you got to have that self-awareness. You got to be able to say, oh, did I really handle that the way I should have? And then to be honest with yourself, to take a step back and say, no, you really didn't. And this is probably what you should have had. But then again, but then more than that, to go back to that friend of mine that I was telling you about and say, hey, this is what happened. This is what I did. I think I messed up. What do you think? And to have that honest feedback for her to be able to say, yep, you really screwed that one up.
Mm,
So, and then to say, okay, well, how do I fix it? And then to be able to kind of talk through that
mm,
really makes a huge difference in the way I'm able to lead.
mm. Man, I love that. Yeah, because we as leaders, we've got to be willing to set our egos aside, our pride aside, and ask for help, right? Ask for help. I unfortunately was um, years into my leadership before I learned to ask for help because most leaders, like me, uh, we think we have to have all the answers. We think we have to know everything. We're afraid to let others in on our mistakes and that we don't know what we're doing, yet they know anyway, right? I mean, our followers always know that we don't
Absolutely.
know what we're doing. And so I love that. Tell me about how you learned to become a self-coach versus a self-critic, because when you talk about emotional intelligence mindset, I'm a big proponent of the mindset of leadership, and we have to work on what's between our ears, and I do believe there's a difference in being a self-coach versus a self-critic. Unfortunately, most people are self-critics. um, we all struggle, even if we're great. Like I feel like I'm a great self coach, but I also struggle with self criticism, right? So, how do you hold yourself accountable to be a coach of self versus a critic of self?
And I think it's being able to be, to your point, to be honest with yourself. I don't have all the answers. I don't claim to know all the answers. And I need to keep humble enough to ask for that help, but also I try to stay connected spiritually. And, what would Jesus do, as a self coach? I want to say, nobody's harder on me than I am on myself. 1000%. I can tell you that. No, no, you can, of every evaluation I've ever had, I'm probably harder on me than anybody else has ever been. But I stay connected to both spiritually, but also to those people that help me build up. And like I said, when I talk to my friend and I say, okay, I really screwed this up, she's the first one to say, but it's okay.
Mm,
It's okay. You are going to make mistakes and that's okay. What makes you the great leader is that you're willing to say you made a mistake and you're willing to go back and correct that mistake, or at least try to repair that relationship that could have been damaged from that mistake.
that's so good. Yeah, I think that's the battle we all have to fight as leaders, because as we started out this conversation, we accidentally fall into it, right? We we don't, and maybe we didn't even want it, but somebody else either had the belief in us or they were just dumb and thought, man, I need somebody in this role, right? Whatever it was, we get promoted into that role, but it's so easy to say, oh my gosh, I'm not prepared, I'm gonna fail. um, and it's important to stay in that self-coaching mindset, being willing to ask for help. How do you coach your leaders? Because you're, now as a CNO, you're a senior leader. And I don't know how many direct reports you have. Maybe you can share that with us. But how do you coach those leaders to make sure they never get, look, we want them to learn. We learn from our mistakes, right? We learn from failures. It's failing forward. But at the same time, as a leader, we don't want our followers to fall so deep in that pit of despair before asking for help. So what is your advice, your coaching, your mentoring for those that you lead?
So I have 12 direct reports who are absolutely amazing. I have some I'm very fortunate to have some really great leaders, but it all starts with relationship. And that's where you have to begin. So when I came in, as an interim, when I first came in, that was my role. And so my job was to come in, blow it up, start all over, and then have somebody else kind of come in and build it back up. Well, the problem was I ended up staying. So now I had to go back and repair the relationships, and that was a very tedious journey. And when I say tedious, it wasn't quick, right? It was, you got to build trust one step at a time, one day at a time. One of the things that I make sure that I do in any leadership role is I meet with my direct reports one-on-one every month without fail. What's going on in your world? I always start my meetings out with, hey, how's your children doing? Or, hey, you were telling me about this big baseball game that your son was playing in. How did that go? It's again building that relationship and then letting them tell you what's the great things that's happening in your department. Share that with me because I want to celebrate with you. What are your challenges? What can I do to help bear your bust for you so that you can continue to be successful? And then what do you want to see from me as a leader? How can I help you grow from a professional standpoint so that you feel like you are very well-rounded? And then I ask for honest feedback. How am I doing as a leader? What am I not giving you? Because I need to know what you're missing because my job is to make sure you are the best that you can be. And then again, taking that feedback and really reflecting on it and putting into action what they're telling you they may be missing.
That's really, really good. Let's get into some more specific terms that we wanted to talk about. And you've shared so much about, mentorship and coaching and growth already. But what is mentoring? That's really what we wanted to kind of define for our listeners today is what is mentoring to you? How have you utilized mentors in your growth and development over the years? And where does someone who needs a mentor find one?
So go back to talking about that chief nursing officer that I told you that I wanted to be like. One of the things that really set me on my journey for executive leadership was him. He saw something in me that I did not know that was even there. I had no idea it existed, but he saw it and he spent time really pulling that out of me and helping me to develop to become a great leader. And I have made it a mission, so to speak, to seek those people out that aren't that I see great talent in, and I want to develop them the way I was developed. Anytime I go into a new role, I always look around who's surrounding me, and then I seek out those individuals that are most like me and that individual that's nothing like me because I wanted to understand how they lead because they don't lead anything like I do. But then I also want to align myself with the leader that does lead like me because again, there are similarities in that leadership that I can grow with. And then on the flip side, there's no similarities in the way that individual leads, but there's still things I can learn from them and still grow as a leader. So I think in order to be well-rounded, you have to seek out that individual that you feel comfortable with and you want to be like, and then that individual that you're nothing like, but you see good things in them as well. And so that helps you be well-rounded.
Yeah, I love that. It just reminds me of a topic. I wrote a book called Quit Losing Talent. And, in my book, I talk about biases. We all have biases. And if we only surround ourselves with people that are like us, they just confirm our biases, right? It's confirmation bias is the term I use. But if we surround ourselves with people that aren't like us, then they challenge our biases, right? Maybe for the better, and maybe not, but at least it's a different lens to look at things through. Certainly, I need leaders in my life. I need people in my life. I feel like I'm a really, really, really good leader. I do some things very, very well, but I also need leaders. I need people in my life that are highly relational, because relationship building is not natural to me. Even though I'm really good at it, I've had to develop it by learning from others that aren't like me, like you just described, right? I had to get around people that were great at building relationships and learn from them so that I could learn to implement some of that in my style as well, because I'm a very task-oriented, driven individual. Maybe that's why, I'm self-employed. I'm an entrepreneur. I see heal, take heal, right? I mean, that's so I've had to work on that. So I love your advice about getting around people that aren't like us as well, because we need a different perspective. They see things through a different filter than we see. Other than that chief nurse that you mentioned that really inspired you, that you wanted to be like, who have been some other mentors in your life that have really challenged you and pushed you to a higher level?
So I worked for the first female CEO I ever worked for. She was tough, man. She was really, really, really tough. And I appreciated that so much about her, because I can be tough, but I can also be that pushover really easy. And I wanted to be more like that, and have that executive presence. And when I walk into a room and people, know that I'm in charge, and I kind of struggled with that. And so she recognized that I struggled with that. So she took me under her wing and said, "Hey, I'm gonna teach you a few things. In addition, I'm gonna get you an executive coach who can help you navigate some of these difficult situations that you're finding yourself in, so that you can have a more concise way of dealing with that."
Mm.
And so that was so important. And I actually still keep in touch with my executive coach, because you always, like I said, you need somebody to bounce those things off of. And they're able to see things from a different view or a different lens than you see them. And I think that is so incredibly important as you navigate some of those landmines that you definitely find yourself in leadership, that you need to have that unbiased, like you said, neutral party who doesn't know anybody, any of the players at all, and is listening to you, how you're describing it,
Mm-hmm.
and then being able to say it back to you. What I think I hear you saying is XYZ. And it's either, yes, that's exactly what I'm saying, or no, wait, that's not what I meant. And so it kind of helps you see maybe you weren't looking at the situation the way you should have been.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good, because, yeah, I mean, when we're in it, we typically, because we're humans, we see it through our emotions many times, not the logical way that we really need to handle things, right? So we handle things out of our emotions, which may or may not be a good place to handle things from. And as you said earlier in your career, because you were maybe a pushover, you didn't want to, you maybe gave a little bit too much freedom or leash, or, for lack of a better term,
Mm-hmm.
you may let people abuse your leadership a little bit. You're doing that from a place of emotion, maybe wanting to be liked, not hurt people's feelings, those kind of things.
Right.
And so again, these are all things that we have to learn, right? I'm on the opposite side of that. I didn't worry about hurting people's feelings. I didn't care about your feelings. And so I had to come from the other side, Shannon. I had to learn to care about people's feelings and have a little empathy and compassion for situations. So no matter where we're at in leadership, we're going to have challenges. I mean, my strengths of being driven can become weaknesses for me in certain situations. Your strengths of being compassionate and empathetic can become weaknesses for you when you got to do things, right? And so
Exactly.
we have to, again, those are strengths, but we also need to not let them become our weaknesses, challenges. What are some, you said you're a podcast listener, maybe reading books, those kind of things. Who are some people you read, you listen to, that others should be reading and listening to really grow?
So Stephen Covey, I actually have it on my desk right now.
Yeah, love
One of
that
the books
book.
I'm looking at right now is called The Speed of Trust.
Mm.
That's a really good one. I spent a lot of time in Patrick Lencioni's books as well. I did a lot of work. I did a lot of reading in emotional intelligence because I did struggle with that early on, and I still do. And so it's very helpful for me to go back and reconnect to some of those ideas and mindsets to keep me focused on what I should be doing. I spend a lot of time in my Bible. I read every morning, just because I think nobody better than Jesus to be a mentor and a leader. And then if I happen to, as I'm scrolling through like Amazon, don't judge me. But as I'm looking for different books on Amazon, a title might catch my eye. I'll click on that and look at and review that book and see if it's something that I might be interested in. And that's how I have found books in the past, something that an author I didn't even know or hadn't even heard of, but the title grabbed me, and I was like, oh, well, that sounds like something I might be interested in. And so at least go in and take a look at and see if it's something that I should pay more attention to.
That's good. Yeah, you mentioned, your relationship with Christ. He's the ultimate model of leadership, right? And when you think about mentoring, there's no better place to really kind of get mentoring. And again, I'm not a theologian. I try to learn scripture, but there's a scripture that says, if you abide in me, I will abide in you, right? Stay attached to the vine. What he's saying is, stay attached to me, I'll stay attached to you. Learn from me how to do those things that maybe are hard, right? But if we detach, so here's kind of the mentoring lesson. If we detach ourselves from learning, growing, listening, mentoring from others, we will lose our ability to get better as a leader, right? That's just me taking scripture and applying it to our real world. I need to abide in. For you and I, we're both faith-based people. I start there. I need to abide in that. But for maybe if you're a listener and you're not a faith-based person, it's abiding in some growth and mentorship and leaders out there that have experience that maybe you don't have that you can learn from. So mentoring, as Shannon's talked to us about, is vital for our growth. Mentoring doesn't have to be this face-to-face relationship. It can be through a book or through a podcast, where we can learn from someone. Certainly, I've never met Christ in the flesh, but he's been a mentor in my life for a long, long time, right? So just want to make sure our listeners understand that as well. What, you talked about, you've been doing this for a long time now, 30 years. You said you still stay in touch with your coach. Is that important? Why do we don't you have it figured out yet, Shannon? Come on.
Not at all, not even a little bit. And again, because you are going to struggle with landmines. They are going to be things that come out of nowhere that you were not prepared for, or you never even saw coming. And so it catches you such off guard that sometimes you got to have that neutral person to bounce that off of and say, man, this was just like, I've never dealt with this before. I've never had this interaction, and I'm not real sure where I go from here. Because again, I don't have all the answers, but I'm not afraid to say that. I'm not afraid to go seek somebody who may. And sometimes they don't have the answer either, but between the two of us, we can come up with some sort of a response that makes sense and can help the situation.
Yeah, that's where that third mind come in, the spiritual mind, where two or more gathered in my name, right? It's just that vibration, that energy that's pulling more thought, more creativity into our lives. So having others in our life to bump ideas off of versus being alone is so important. And to Shannon's point, I don't care how high you grow or how long you've been doing this. Look, I've been a student of leadership since I was 23 years old. That's 30 years, 31 years, by the way. I'm still I get new books every day. I'm reading a new book, Shannon, you might want to pick up, but also our listeners, called Super Communicator, because the number one skill, number 1A, I think number one is emotional intelligence, and 1A is communication. but Super Communicator by Charles Duhigg. It's really about kind of the science. Charles is a researcher, and so it's kind of he's researched the power of connection and certain things we can do to really communicate and connect with people in a more effective way. I could I could give you 10 books on communication, but that's the one I'm reading right now. And so, the lesson behind it is never stop growing, because at every level of leadership, Shannon, now I want you to talk about this. At every level of leadership, there's a new level of growth we've got to have, right? So you go from manager to director to VP to now chief. Talk about the different levels of learning you've had to go through as you've progressed up that ladder of leadership.
Well, I think again, it's, as a manager, you have a responsibility to those that are underneath you, but there's that person that's above you. So you don't have full responsibility. So you may be able to divvy out those responsibilities. I'll take the schedule, for example. You take payroll, or just throwing things out off the top of my head. As the chief nursing officer, I am responsible for the entire kit and caboodle. So I'm not just responsible for those direct reports, but I'm also responsible for all of those individuals that fall underneath those direct reports.
Mm-hmm.
So my job is not just to inspire those that I lead directly, but also those that I lead indirectly. And any decisions that I make are going to be impactful from the bottom all the way up. And so you always have to keep that in mind as a chief nursing officer, because you're not just impacting one subset, you're impacting the entire subset, or the entire group rather. And so inspiration is very important. You have to have a vision, but more importantly, you have to be able to speak that vision so that people can see it in addition to as you see it. So they can be part of that journey, because that's what it's all about. It's making them part of that journey, so that you can get to the aspired place together as a whole. And so that's a heavy weight. It's a heavy weight to carry sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. And the skill set going from managing and directing, on the front lines, to inspiring and empowering at the top, which is where you're at now, right? You're a leader of leaders now, not a leader of workers. It's
Right.
those leaders that are managing and directing now at those front lines. But the skills, and when I say skills, I call them essential skills. I hate the term soft skills, because there's nothing soft about what we do in leadership, right? I mean, it's like you talk about, having to have those difficult conversations. That's not a soft skill at all. That's very hard,
It's
because
very hard.
you got to deal with all those emotions between your ears, right? And emotions aren't soft; they're hard to deal with. So I call them essential skills. But those are things we have to learn as we climb that ladder. It's Look, it's way easier to just tell somebody what to do than to inspire and empower them to do it. Would you agree
Absolutely.
with that?
1000%. 1000%.
So how have you been able to make that transition from telling and directing to the inspiring and empowering at your level now?
So I'm a firm believer in role model. And so I purposely go out throughout the hospital. I stay close to the actual bedside nursing staff. I ask them, what's working well for you? What's not working well for you? And that's where I find a lot of the times that there are processes that are broken. So instead of just coming out and say, okay, I'm going to fix this process by X, Y, and Z, I bring people to the table and say, okay, here's the problem. This is what you've told me. How do we fix it? And then being collaborative to allow them to be empowered enough to say, this will work or it won't work. And the only way you're going to get that information is to go out and seek it. They're not going to come to you. You have to go to them. But more than that, you have to be open. You have to actively listen. And then you have to check your bias at the door. You have to check your emotions at the door. You have to check your ego at the door, right? Because you may have had this great idea and they look at you and like, oh no, that'll never work. And you have to be okay with that, and be willing to accept that, and help them come to a solution that works for them. Because at the end of the day, they're the end user. They got to live with it, not me.
Yeah. Yeah, I love all of that. I agree. Checking all that at the door, plus checking your need to criticize and fix things while you're there, right? Because our job, unless it's life or death, which it sometimes can be in healthcare, but unless it's life or death, when we're doing that rounding, we shouldn't be going around criticizing, condemning everything everybody's doing. It's opportunity for conversation, collaborative conversation that you're talking about later, to and then to be curious about why they're doing things a certain way and how we can make it better, right? Versus you need to do it this way because y'all are doing it wrong, which is where a
Absolutely.
lot of leaders get rounding wrong, right? They come in and they start pointing out all the problems. And so what happens is followers, they say, "Oh my God, here comes Shannon. Let's hide. Let's act like we're working."
Exactly.
So we have to change that. I write about that in my book. I call it C squared rounding, and it's just another level of conversational connection that we need to have with people versus coming in and pointing out problems and or asking, "Hey, do you need anything from me?" That's what I call drive-by rounding. We're
Right.
driving by and we're kind of shooting at people, firing. Hey, that's not right. Pick that trash up. You're not doing that right. Get off your phone. And again, I'm not saying we shouldn't think about those things, but if that's the only thing we're doing in our rounding, all we're doing is we're not building trust, we're destroying trust, right? When you think
Absolutely.
about that speed of trust there as well.
They have
Um,
to see you as human. You
yeah,
you are just another human. You put your pants on just the way they do.
yeah, absolutely. Let's wrap up with this final question, Shannon. Why should we be mentoring the next generation?
Oh, that is a great question. And I'm going to go back to what I said about the CNO that saw something in me that I did not see in myself. Had he not done that, I would not be sitting here today. He's retiring, right? He's at the end of his career. I'm just beginning mine.
Mm,
So you have to pour back into the next generation because they're going to be the leaders of the future. They're going to be, and especially with healthcare, they're going to take care of me someday. I'm going to wake up and there's going to be somebody that I had the opportunity to mentor standing over me providing care. And that's
amen.
the way it is in any business that you're in. You're going to have to deal with that generation that you're currently working with. And so I think I want I want to make someone feel about themselves the way that he made me feel about myself, that I can do more, that I can be more, that there is opportunity. Don't take no for an answer. Don't stop at just that degree. Keep going, keep driving, keep learning, keep aspiring to be more than you can be. And then I hope that I'm able to bring that next generation along with me because again, they're going to be taking care of me someday.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's, I want to dig deeper just a little bit into that because it's easy to see from where you're at now, right? It's easy to see that we need to be doing that. Number one, you and I are a little bit more experienced than others out there. We've got the experience of wisdom or age, whatever you want to call it, and we're at a higher level, so we can see maybe the problems from a different viewpoint. Let's speak to the front line manager, supervisor, director right now. Because I think where we have made major mistakes, especially in healthcare, but in many businesses, is and in nursing it's called we eat our young, right? And
Mhm,
but the saying, I've heard leaders say, well, I had to learn it the hard way, they should too.
mhm.
And it goes all the way back to saying, you were accidentally put in a leadership role. Luckily for you, you were self-motivated and grew yourself. But let's talk to that frontline manager, supervisor, director right now. Why should they see mentoring as a number one priority and responsibility for them versus just letting people learn it the hard way?
Because you don't know what you don't know.
Mm,
And the only way you're going to find out is to seek out someone who's been there or who has some of those life experiences. It's so important to seek out that trustworthy person that again, I go back to what I said at the beginning of the podcast with my friend that came into leadership at the same time. We did figure it out, but we figured it out together. And had I had to do it by myself, I do not think I would have been on the journey that I was placed on because of that relationship. I think I would have burned out a lot quicker. I think I would have given up. And I think I would not have had that cheerleader to say, come on, we can do this. We got this. We're okay. We're figuring it out. Let's just keep going
Mm.
and
Yeah,
ask for that help. Don't be afraid to ask for that help.
yeah, that's really good. I think that's important too, you know, as maybe someone who doesn't have a mentor out there right now, ask for help. If you can't find it, there, you know, the advantage that this generation has that I didn't have. Shannon, you're a little bit younger than me, I think, but you know,
Oh, no, same age.
we didn't have you know, we had books, but we didn't have YouTube and we didn't have the internet really early in our life, right? I mean, I was in my mid 20s before the internet really even came
Yep.
around. And then, you know, but now like I'm in the gym this morning at 6 o'clock, but I'm listening to a podcast. I'm listening to a book. I can learn always now while I'm driving, right? It's so easy today. So I just want to inspire our listeners. If you don't have a mentor, find a podcast, find books, find authors that you can listen to. They can become mentors. Look, I've read I've read books by authors I've never met in my life. I've been lucky to meet some of those authors, right? And so that's good. But you do need to have a mentor. You need to ask for help, and you also, when you have a mentor, just some things that you need to do. If you ask for advice from a mentor, the next time you meet with them, say, Shannon, hey, this is what we talked about. Here's what you challenged me to do. Here's what I did. And so you report back on that. That inspires the mentor to keep mentoring you, because now they know you're going to do something with it, versus just ask for information and not really do anything with it to get better. So that's number one, as a mentor. Number two, you know, those frontline leaders. Look, I wrote a book called Quit Losing Talent. We have a major epidemic of retention issues and turnover issues. One of the number one ways to improve your retention is to mentor your employees. Give them a reason to stay. They want to feel valued. They want to be developed. Shannon's given us some great ways and tips and ideas of how to do that today. So, Shannon, thank you. Any final thoughts around mentoring leadership that you'd like to share before we wrap up?
I, yeah, I like what you said about the challenge. You know, challenge yourself, but also challenge those that you are fortunate enough to lead. Because when they do something and you get to share in that success, there is no greater feeling than that.
Mm,
I akin it to watching my daughter play her first basketball game and score her first basket. It's the same feeling. It's that feeling of, wow, look at what we did. Look what we were able to accomplish. And that is what motivates me to keep going every
yeah.
single day.
Yeah, I love that. And, you know, as we record this episode, we're right in the middle of the Olympics going on. And I love every athlete, after they've won a medal, they get up and they begin to thank all the people that have helped them along the way, right? We never do it alone. I used to think I got here by myself. No, I didn't. I mean, I got here through books and mentoring and coaching and leaders who stepped into my life at a critical time. We never arrived to a place by ourselves. Now, certainly, I've done the work, but it was because of advice and coaching and all of those things along the way. Shannon, thank you for being a great leader in the healthcare space. Thank you for what you do and mentoring that next generation. That's important in any industry, but especially healthcare, because some days those younger folks are going to be our care providers, or leading others to be our care providers as well. So thanks so much for being a great guest on the Lead Up Podcast.